Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know there's a kind of joke about Holland's time where we should wait 5 minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. I know there's a lot going on tonight, so we're so happy that you're here with us. My name is Janine Culligan. I'm the director of the Eleanor D Museum at Holland University. I guess you know that. Before I introduce our visiting artist, Suzanne Schireson, I want to ask that you turn off your cell phones, please. And also want to let you know that we're having a reception right after the lecture, so I hope you'll join us out in the hallway. In fact, I hear that there might be some macarons out there, so please do join us. And also the museum is going to be open until 8 p.m., so you'll have an opportunity to see the exhibit. In November of 2021, I received an exhibit proposal from Suzanne Schireson. She offered an exhibit of 20 paintings that used high-key color to depict women engaging in provisional studio structures during marginal hours of the day. I was taken by Susie's fluorescent, almost neon colors and decided this was work to which all could relate and that especially students would respond to. I try to work at least a year and a half out with our exhibition schedule, and so the gallery that was available was our largest gallery, which we call Main Gallery, and I wasn't sure if the 20 paintings would fill the space. So I came up with the idea of creating a space within the gallery where people could create, and it kind of, I think you'll hear more about the series and how that kind of relates to the work. But I wanted to create a space where people who are caretakers could come and get a break and maybe create on their own. Susie liked the idea. She made a great mock-up design for it, and we have that in the gallery now, so I hope you'll come and see that. We have an intern right now, Sarah, who came up with the title Makeshift Makerspace. Laura Carden designed a house-shaped book that you can create as part of the makerspace, and Laura Jane marketed the exhibit. Janet, as always, painted the house shape and installed the exhibit. And so thanks to everyone on the museum team, it all came together. And I just want to give them a huge thank you for making that happen. I also want to thank Suzanne Schireson, who's been wonderful to work with, a great collaborator, and happy that you kind of went with us with this creative space. And so I hope you all will spend some time coming back to the museum, looking at the works, and hopefully creating a little house-shaped book. And last but no means least, I want to thank the Roanoke Arts Council. This exhibition and its related programs are sponsored in part by the City of Roanoke through the Roanoke Arts Commission. And now I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Suzanne Schireson. Suzanne is an artist and professor who works and lives in Rhode Island. She is the recipient of many fellowships and 2 Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation grants. Her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, and I'll list just a few of the places: the Woodmere Art Museum in Philadelphia, Smith College, Northampton, Massachusetts, the New Bedford Museum of Art in New Bedford, Massachusetts, a place in Korea, which I'm not going to try and pronounce that, and a wonderful place in Assam, India, and the Carousel du Louvre in Paris, France. So her work has been many, many places, and we're so happy to have it here. Schireson attended Indiana University, received her MFA there, and got her BFA at the University of Pennsylvania, and received a certificate in fine arts from Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. She is an associate professor of art and design at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. And at this time, please give Suzanne Schireson a warm Holland welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Janine. The museum team here has been so amazing, and I'm really grateful, Janine, for your idea to build this studio inside the gallery. It's been very inspiring for me to think about the paintings in that context, and for everyone who's helped to make that happen. I'm very grateful. It was really a pleasure today to meet with so many Holland students in Elise Schweitzer's painting and drawing classes, and also being in the senior studios was really a treat. So I so appreciate that, and that you shared your work with me. So Elise and I both went to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, so did Laura Cardin. And, this is sort of typical of one of the historic classrooms. There's Elise on the left, Laura's down in the front, and I'm standing. No, but this is from 1905, and so there's, a deep and long history of classical training at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and it's been interesting to think about that training and also to sort of try to depart from it a bit as well. I always loved this photograph though, and in particular in this women's life drawing class, the life drawing classes are segregated, of course, and so but with men and women, and so there are not, I guess, enough easels for this particular class, and so everyone's using their chairs upside down, which was often typical. When COVID hit and my courses went online, my life drawing class, I thought, great, just take your kitchen chair, turn it upside down, it'll be fine, this will be over soon, don't worry, get your 18 by 24 inch pad of paper, and it stinks. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but everything slips around. We were all very frustrated by it, so it really is quite difficult to hold this. And so this particular painting, was obviously inspired by that, and it gives you a nice view too of sort of how I work with transparent washes. So the brightest color is actually kind of the thinnest color, and then the thicker paint is often like more of the neutral or often sort of in the sky. So I hope you can see kind of the texture in that painting. But I think this kind of do-it-yourself aesthetic of just trying to get to work, even if you don't have an easel and you're flipping the chair over upside down, was very much something that I think I was feeling in COVID because of limitations and also different kinds of caretaking responsibilities and trying to compartmentalize time. So just thinking about sort of how some of those resolutions came. And so the sensory power of color is something that I've always really been very interested in. This painting is from about 10 years earlier. It's called Loose Fish, Fast Fish, and is taken from a chapter of Moby Dick. When I first moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts, I thought I need to read Moby Dick, right? So it was a very interesting sort of field trip for me to go across the city and figure out where I could buy fish heads for this painting, and I had a small freezer in my studio. So at that point, I really loved, and I still do, working from direct observation. It was really important for me to have these heads in the freezer, and I'd take them out and I'd paint them while they defrosted, and when they got kind of stinky, I'd put them back in. But I think that experience, like that sensory experience, definitely affected some of the color choices. And I always think when I look at this head that I had painted, sort of how that, you almost feel like the odor in a way. You sort of feel the smell come up through this vermilion green that's like complementing the flesh. And then, subtlety of color is fascinating too. And when two colors, if the value is very similar, you lose the edge of something. So in this paper hat painting, it's called Blind Spot, and is very much about the experience of seeing and sort of how paintings can play tricks on your eyes in a way, where you lose the back edge of the hat because it's so close within its value, to the wall behind. I was living in Boston at the time. This was right after graduate school, and I was working adjunct teaching and also working at a Russian preschool. And I was fascinated how the children would create costumes out of anything. Like it could be a piece of paper and they turn into a hat. And so I did a series of self-portraits with just these interesting sort of found or created costumes. And at that point, I started finding some, they would always make capes out of things. And so I found this like discarded construction worker kind of mesh shirt on a walk one day, and immediately ran back to my studio and pretended to be a superhero in front of the mirror, right? It's the kind of thing we do. But this color, working with the fluorescent color, it's so flat, it kind of denies volume in a way. And so it's interesting how it then creates volume in other places. But it also helped me to see all these different colors in flesh that I wasn't automatically seeing. And so I really enjoyed kind of the hallucinatory power a little bit of adding this pigment to my palette. This painting always shocks me when I see it up here. It's actually, about 16 by 20 or so, and maybe I should have painted it this big, but I'm also interested in how oppressive this color can be. It's not just cute, but it's sort of frightening on this scale too. And so just very curious emotionally about like what the color could do. And again, the way that flesh kind of turns green next to it, it sort of reminds me of what gold leaf does in classical painting sometimes, the way that it forces other colors around it to behave a little bit differently because it's sort of so opulent. And that fit with the theme. I mean, during this moment, I was feeling very overwhelmed within my body. And so, that was echoed in this distortion that I was creating with this 80s bomber ski jacket that my sister had given me that she got at a thrift store. But my studio was freezing too, and so it actually just helped in the moment to be painting in that jacket. But I was interested at that time to insert myself in as a lot of different figures. So even though I was working with self-portraiture, it's kind of curious how that figure would read and if it would read like someone else. And so this drawing was called Haircut, and I was reading a text that my great-grandfather had written about plastic surgery. He was a really early plastic surgeon, and he wrote this book that kind of convinces you that you need plastic surgery and makes you very self-conscious. It's not a good thing. But so I was really curious to kind of learn more about his story, and I would insert myself as kind of the patient or the doctor or the nurse, to not so directly speak to like a narrative of plastic surgery, but certainly one of kind of self-transformation or starting to kind of question those ideas about self. And that evolved into this painting, which the figures are pretty much life-size in this painting, so it is rather large, about 8 feet wide. And the painting is called Somewhere Between Blood and the Sky, and was related to some of these narratives I was reading, because he would often set up for surgeries. He didn't have a traditional office. It was often like hotel rooms or sort of these makeshift spaces, and that idea of that makeshift space has certainly continued for me. Yes, I would set up the mirror and kind of recreate myself as these different characters. And strangely, this painting, in the sequence of my slides, then it turns into a painting of my son. Those paintings are a few years apart, but having children, definitely, I needed a break from myself, quite frankly, in terms of working for myself out of the mirror. And so all of a sudden, this very strange, long, sinewy body entered my life and didn't look like what I anticipated a baby would look like, was not like a pudgy little cherub, but was this long, skinny kind of fish-like thing. And so I loved, painting him like that. But I was very interested for some time to just explore his form, to explore a figure, that was so much smaller proportionally than I was used to working with. And I would oftentimes, have him draw into the drawing too. That drawing was called Where Words Live. And that was sort of like when he was on the verge of talking, I remember. And also, just the strange new colors and objects that were entering my life. These quintessential skeleton pajamas are kind of something that you see everywhere around Halloween, and it really is a very peculiar experience nurse a baby and put them into the crib and then turn off the light and walk away with this glow-in-the-dark body just shimmering there. It's terrifying and beautiful. So I was just taken by making paintings about beautiful moments that I was experiencing that were definitely tinged with kind of the scariness of death too. I mean, with life, so much. I'd never had been so worried, right, at the same time. And so I think that kind of summed that up for me. This is called The World Lit by Screens. And again, those pajamas kind of would cast this strange iridescent light from the glow in the dark. But I've been just long interested in how those unusual colors start to affect flesh, or how I can bring those into flesh. This particular painting was of like a bird's eye view of myself nursing, kind of imagining myself a few feet above me. And the idea that, with all of this kind of new life in effect, my hair is turning gray up top there. But it was interesting the head in this painting is maybe 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. It's pretty large in terms of the scale of the body. But kind of abstracting us and cropping us into one form was an interesting challenge. And so that painting was called Nursing. This painting was called Weaning, which is the act of like stopping, to stop nursing. And I did a series of these women, these sort of mothers as DJs, and the idea of multitasking and kind of performing this performative act that ends up in this sort of audiovisual overload in a way. But it was really exciting to paint these very complicated and kind of condensed narratives that moved away from the baby, that was still working conceptually with some ideas about how I was feeling and about motherhood, but sort of stepped away from depicting a child. And so there were a number of these within that series, and they were often, multitasking or otherworldly or kind of caught between worlds. That's how I think of these paintings, that these women are often caught between worlds. And the landscape crept into my work at that point too. This painting was called Hunters Who Gather, and we were picking raspberries. I was picking raspberries one day with my son, and that inspired the painting. But I remember this painting really for me was sort of about leaving it at dawn. So there's a figure all the way over on the left, if you can see, who has these like pruning shears, and I would often, try to leave and go to the studio before my son would wake up. And so I always felt like I was kind of escaping at dawn when he was like not fully aware. And so I think, kind of creeping back into my own world while he slept in a way. And that definitely is translated, I think, into the current paintings as well. Just throwing in a baby for scale. That's my daughter, Hope. Who was born, she's 4 years old. She's here, actually. She's not in the auditorium right now, but hopefully you'll see her. She loves hanging out in the show, which is really a treat. But around the time that I had Hope, I started thinking about more sort of like maybe what it meant to be an artist and a parent, because my whole life, anything in my life has been part of my art. And so this was really taking control in a lot of ways. But this is an awesome resource founded by Sarah Irvin, who is a Virginia artist. And you can look, I'm sure there's so many more items than 267. I took this screenshot quite some time ago. But it lists different exhibitions by artist parents and different artists, different kinds of subject matter, having to do with child rearing as well. And I just found that it was wonderful to not feel alone, and to see that there were so many people who were also dealing with this subject matter. This is Lenka Clayton, who's an incredible artist. This is her walking studio from 2001. And this was part of an artist residency in motherhood, which is kind of a performative project almost that I guess you could call it, that she had started. And so at this point, there are mothers all over the globe who join into this artist in residency and motherhood. And the idea obviously being like, you're in your home, you're not traveling, you've just had a baby, but to still sort of find some way to engage in your practice and to engage in a community of other people. And there's no pacing that's enforced or anything like that, but I think as a concept and certainly as a project, it's quite beautiful. And so she's walking to kind of keep her son calm in that carrier, and so she's drawing while she's walking. So she created, this tray to kind of work with. Another piece of hers is this documentation, 63 objects taken from my son's mouth, 2012. Love that. So on the eve of, the pandemic and having my second child, I left my studio temporarily and was painting in my basement. This is my glamour shot there. Of my unfinished basement. And I think, there was a lot of, I downscaled the work. The work shrunk down quite a bit, and I became really intimate in a different way. And so I began making these paintings that were based on conversations with other women and inventing these portraits of them and inventing spaces for them based on their interests or needs. This particular painting, this was one of the first, this is called Stacy the Welder, and is formed, inspired by someone who I teach with at UMass Dartmouth, Stacy Savage, who's an incredible artist, who literally built a welding studio in a garage. And it's really an impressive space. So that one was less fictional and kind of more, sort of started it. But then from there, the series grew, and I started to think more about motherhood, not so much as like direct subject matter, but as kind of a conceptual framework. And so this work, they're not directly taking care of children per se in this image, but I am thinking about how these spaces could be created for them outside of those caretaking responsibilities, and what sort of strange activities we might, be privy to find in there. And in quarantine, taking more time with those that I was caring for, these flashes of solitude where I could get into my studio are particularly rare, and it just gave the work a different kind of purpose. And this particular painting actually is modeled after my mother-in-law, who just came in the room. Hi, Blanche and Hope. And Blanche is a weaver and had twins when she was 26 years old. And was an artist at that time, but stopped when her twins were born, and has come back into weaving so strongly with like full throttle. And so I made this painting kind of imagining Blanche at 26 in a way. And this is modeled after her Saori loom that she works with now. So it's really interesting for me in paintings to kind of cut back and forth in time too, that, we don't have to be so logical necessarily with the narrative. And this painting as well, this is called Architect, and a lot of times these buildings are partially formed, or they're not, just like the last painting, like the women are getting to work before the building's even finished. It doesn't need to be, a perfect studio in a way, just a place to begin. And it's been exciting to kind of let the landscape into that space too. So there's sort of that open edge between the building and the sky. This particular painting is based on an artist named Lauren McLaughlin, who's an artist who works in collage and neon. And so she had built this incredible neon sculpture of a woman giving birth. And so I was just interested to try to, think about what it would look like to be working on neon in your shed at night. And Lauren started this incredible gallery called Spilt Milk, which is in Edinburgh, Scotland, and is like an artist mother collective. So artist mothers from across the world are members and share within this community. And it's something that Lauren started a few years ago. And that served as like a big inspiration for me, I think, as this series began, to think about that connectivity and thinking about what other people were doing around the world. And so this piece She was a fellow at the Birthrights Collection Residency in the Department of Midwifery in King's College London, where she made this piece. And it's called The Creation of the World. And she made it in 2016. It's neon and transformers. And that's a shot of her studio. I love collecting photographs of people's studios. So as I was saying, the buildings often kind of struggle to hold the figures, or the women get to work before the structure is complete. And so it expands that open edge between architecture and the landscape. And I think it expands the definition of the studio too. It's no longer necessarily a fixed place. It can be movable. And of course it often is. Sometimes it's the kitchen table, sometimes it's the basement. It could be so many different alternatives. I really intend these spaces to be more psychological than physical, so they don't need to be overly realistic. And they're not about escape so much as really like a deep desire to reflect and refuel and just digest, what is happening so rapidly, I think, in my day-to-day. And they are often these temporary or like provisional spaces. It's interesting for me to think about just setting up camp. Actually, to be honest, this space it was across from my daughter's daycare. It's just like a lean-to on the back of the building, and I found myself like longingly looking at it and thinking it would be an interesting place to set up shop. But I don't paint it from life. I'm going home and doing drawings, and then reworking the painting and inventing things. But this was called Turmeric Dye Night, and I was imagining working with dye. Like there's this large lace piece that's been dyed and is hanging up. And so just an example of sort of where I would set up camp, in pretty unlikely places in and around my home. And so within the garage, I remember my children were outside playing for much of that day. This particular painting is called Backyard Frankenthaler. And it's interesting for me to look at and think about many female artist heroes, within art history, and how challenging it would have been for them to have children. So many of them didn't for obvious reasons, or for personal reasons, but that's sort of a meditation on some of that. And this particular painting was included in a show in North Carolina where Tiger Strikes Asteroid, which is a cooperative gallery, had these gallery boxes that they installed through the city of Asheville. And so the paintings were in this outdoor gallery space during COVID, so people could walk through the city and they could come across, there were 5 of these that were installed. And it was just interesting. I would get emails from people that, they would walk by a painting every day and, wanted to reach out. It was fun to see them out in the wild. And so it's sort of a provisional space within a provisional space. That one's my favorite, the turkeys, the trash bags. And so these are actually in the gallery. Many of these are in the gallery. So it's wonderful. They've had this life. They've traveled around a little bit. The title of the show in the gallery is Aftercare, and I think of that theme as twofold. One is that aftercare refers to programming that often happens after school for kids, aftercare programs, and it's this transient time that's really often challenging to cover, because it's like when the school day ends for a kid and then when the adult work day ends. And so that aftercare that's a term that you hear a lot in terms of caretaking. And so I also think about aftercare as a way to reflect and refuel this form of self-care, really. And so that was sort of the other facet of it. When one job of caring for others is finished, then there's this moment of expansion and release to kind of like turn back to oneself, to turn back to create in whatever form that might be, not necessarily art. And so the way that the gallery has been designed reminds me of an aftercare facility in a way, kind of like an after-school program almost, as well as one of those makeshift studios from one of my paintings. And so I'm just so grateful to Janine for having the vision to do this. And then I got so excited that I made this little drawing and emailed it to Janine. She's like, oh, Janet's brilliant. We're going to figure out a way to do this. And so this was one of the initial concept sketches. And you can see we've changed some things from there, but it's so fun for me to kind of think about that in the context of what you're going to see in the gallery. Also in the gallery, there are a number of books, these bookshelves. There's one for kids and one for adults, but we can definitely mix between those. And I think a bookshelf is, essential to any studio practice. But these are particular books that I collected over the past couple of years about the creative process and intersections between care and art, and surprising overlaps between motherhood and art. This is Modernism by Lise Haller-Bagson. And so for the last couple slides, I just have a few quotes from some of these books to pique your interest. So maybe you crack those books when you go in gallery. In this book, Lise Haller-Bagson, looks at this perceived schism between motherhood and being an artist, and has a lot of interesting commentary on it. She says, modernism is co-laboring with the forces. She also says, modernism is an orgy of organization. And I think many of our studios feel like this orgy of organization. It's great when everything's kind of bubbling at the same time and trying to make sense of it all. That's a shot of my studio in process. Sorry, it's just stuck. Another book is The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard, which is really a beautiful text. I didn't include cabin porn in the bookshelf, but that's a book that's made from a website about tiny houses, and it is very, very appealing. I would recommend it, but it's kind of this high-low of, Bachelard and cabin porn here. And so Bachelard says, he talks about how the hermit is before God. His hut, therefore, is just the opposite of the monastery, and there radiates about this centralized solitude, a universe of meditation and prayer, a universe outside the universe. And so often in my paintings, there's this portal or this ground plane that I do sort of think of as that entry into another universe in a way. And one of my friends had asked, well, what about a studio that's just inaccessible right now? Like there's so many things I would love to create, but it feels so far away, like I'm never gonna have time, like I'm never gonna get there. And I thought that was a really beautiful idea because it does often feel that way. And so I started making these paintings that were, this is called the dig site. So it's like an archaeological dig in a way, sort of like a ghost shape of that house. Or it could be, just the beginning, like the sort of architectural, just the siting plan, right, of the beginning of a house. So it's just one that's not formed either from the past or the future. And so leaving these a little bit more open-ended and moving into a bit more abstraction with some of the more literal content really was exciting within some of these paintings as well. Time and capacities for making creative work fluctuate so much. And so, these paintings in my mind kind of hold space for a studio out of reach that's like looming in the distance or sort of feels like it's always under our feet. And so there are a number of these that really emphasize that strong ground plane. Formally, I love that ground plane because so much of my paint naturally is, very organic and kind of curvilinear. And so having these really sort of structural planes, the contrast of that visually has been exciting for me. And another book that is on the shelf is called Women in the Picture, What Culture Does with Female Bodies. And there's a beautiful chapter in there called Mothers. And Catherine McCormack, the author, goes through different kind of archetypes of women within art history. And so the mother chapter was one that stood out to me. And I'll just read her description at the end of that chapter. Finally, in my house, it's the close of the day. I lie down in bed with each child in turn to read stories, to chat, to absorb the syrupy smell of their hair as they drift off to sleep after many kisses and mutual affirmations of love. It's here that I find the stillness I was craving, bolstered by the heat and weight of their little bodies. My mind can finally wander freely, my thoughts tracing patterns across the dark ceiling with its sprinkle of softly fluorescent stars. I linger long after they doze off, suspended in the stasis of the dark bedroom before I leave them and open up the bonfire blaze of my computer screen to work, writing long into the quiet blue hours. Turning out the lights on the stairs, I catch a glimpse of my blurred reflection in the window that makes me jump, although I know it's me. My appearance is spectral against the inky expanse on the other side of the thick glass. Its outline appears doubled, the two versions overlapping, struggling to match. I peer through my own reflection and into the window of a house on the other side of the dark street, where a light has been left over a kitchen sink and a moth circling the bulb. Caught here momentarily on the stairs, I realize that the image I see in the window, the mother, the writer, the woman, the maintenance worker, the thinker, is someone I only half know. She's not the beatific virgin in the Cordis Conclusus, nor the tidy, yummy mummy, nor the angel in the house, nor the MILF. Like Morisot's women, her presence is uncertain. She's someone who is half seen, even to me, someone who I don't have any pictures of. That made me really excited, because I thought, I want to make pictures of these people. Helen Sissou in The Laugh of Medusa says there's always within her a little of that fair, good mother's milk. She writes in white ink. And I was just recently in a show called Milk Tongue, which is taken from a Sissou essay, and she talks about kind of like the language, a certain language that women have that is different. And the importance of telling those stories. In this painting, I inserted my daughter Hope in the space, and the scale of this tiny figure was very interesting to use. In an essay, Jacqueline Gleisner writes, having a creative outlet is, for Schireson and many others, an important way she cares for herself. In her painting, she fixates less on the specific dimensions or appearance of the building, highlighted instead the necessity of its existence. Creating the painting underscores the need for such a place to exist for her daughter, maybe for all daughters. And this gives you kind of a sense of the material too, where sometimes I try to leave areas a little bit more open or kind of undercooked in a way. There's that underpainting that comes through against more of the heavier paint. And just have a few more. Jerry Salt's How to Be an Artist is another book that's in there. And he talks about being, what it's like to be a parent artist. So he doesn't actually have children, but he talks about Laurel Nakate, pointing out that being a parent is already very much like being an artist. It means always lugging things around, living in chaos, doing things that are mysterious or impossible or scary. As with art, children can drive you crazy all day, make you yearn for some peace and quiet. And then in a single second, at any point, you're redeemed with a moment of intense, transformative love. I think that's so true about the studio. You can be so frustrated all day, and then all of a sudden something hits. Being an artist mother leaves no casual time. Mother artists learn to use both hands, stay up all night comforting humans who think the world is ending, which Laura, Jane, and I were talking about last night, become experts at cleaning up blood and vomit and shit in darkness, and then go to work with civilians. They put on clothes, they take phone calls, give talks, plan schedules, explain themselves. They go into professional meetings having survived emotional and physical upheaval. And all this makes them better artists. I hope that's true. This particular van, I love this illustration from Ina May Gaskin's spiritual midwifery from 1976 of this like makeshift space of these women in a band that my mother shared with me, this wonderful book. Just in closing, sorry, I just wanted to dedicate the talk to my mom, because she would love this. And I'm very grateful for my mother-in-law to be here today, and to be here with my daughter, Hope. And so I'm thanking my mom too. And this was actually her favorite color, which is fun too. I never really put that connection together, but so Maggie Nelson says, and she's one more author that's on the shelf, when we make art as when we mother, we often don't know what we're doing. We can never really be sure if it's need, leisure, compulsion, transaction, freedom, or submission, likely because it can be all these things at once or in turns. So thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to cry, but I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you'll join us in the gallery and that you'll make a book. That would be awesome. So if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to meet people outside. And thank you very much.
So thank you all again for coming, and thank you people on Zoom, and please join us for the reception, and if you have